Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the show where we examine important issues either ignored or misrepresented in the mainstream. Hi there, I'm your host Nigel Howitt, and on the show today we're going to examine two major duff steers for truth seekers, two major potential pitfalls that you could fall prey to in your pursuit of truth. It's never been more important to know what's going on, to know what's real, to identify the facts and know what's true than today. Arguably, it's always important to know what's true, but today more than ever because the stakes are higher. Our freedom is at stake, not just the freedom of one country, but the freedom of the whole globe. So, having said that, there are plenty of people out there offering conclusions of what is true and what is not. And there's this huge hubbub noise of competing conclusions trying to vie for your attention and get you to believe in them. I'm not interested in joining that melee of sound necessarily, because I don't think that's going to help. What we need to do is all become effective truth seekers. We need to all be able to discern what's true for ourselves. And that's really where I'm going with the subject of this podcast, because these two traps are widespread and they're so important because ultimately the success of the freedom movement or the truth movement really depends on them. All truth seekers face two potential traps. They are faith and emotions. These two things are not means to know the truth. And by the end of this video, you'll be absolutely clear on why. It's crucial as a truth seeker to understand the consequences of accepting any idea on faith or accepting any idea because you feel that it's true. If you accept an idea on faith, you can be hoodwinked, conned. You are accepting an idea for which there is no evidence. If you accept ideas on the basis of how you feel, you will be susceptible to emotional control. You can be controlled by fear. If somebody frightens you, you are going to react because you believe that your emotions are giving you truth. It's so important to know that emotions are not a means to know truth. They're very valid, and we shall look into this, but they are not a means to know truth. If you accept either of these as a means to know truth, you will never achieve certainty in your knowledge of the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the standard that you need. It's the standard of the law courts. It's the standard you need in order to function, to be confident in your actions. You cannot possibly achieve this level of certainty if you accept ideas on faith or on the basis of emotions, and I will tell you why. But perhaps most importantly, when you've acquired your knowledge, you will never have any ability to persuade others unless you have reasons, unless you have a rational argument, unless you know why what you're claiming is true, you will have no basis, no rational basis to persuade others. And given that governments and institutions are bombarding us with ideas that are not backed up by reasoned argument, any claim to say, hey, here's the solution, will be drowned out in a sea of similarly unverifiable claims, unprovable claims, unknowable claims. So the success of the freedom movement, of the truth movement, depends on us being able to convince and persuade through rational argument others. We need to grow the numbers of people who have genuine knowledge, who understand what's going on. This can't be done by throwing around assertions or feeling that it's true and following our hearts. No, we need facts, and we need to be able to present a reasoned argument in order for the truth movement, the freedom movement, in order for humanity to flourish, in order for all of these goals to be achievable. They must be demonstrable, they must be provable, they must be rational. So first, what is faith? Well, faith is the means of believing religions and all such mystical claims, or any claim really. It could be a claim from a second-hand car salesman. Any claim that is not backed up by facts, any claim or policy or dogma or idea that somebody wishes to assert is true, but they have no reasons to give you. That's when faith is appealed to. Faith is the concept of accepting that reasons are unnecessary. It is accepting ideas without reasons. I was raised a Catholic, and I was told that faith was a virtue and it was the path to God and salvation. Faith, the predisposition to believe things that are unfounded in facts, can only lead to human suffering. Whether it's being sold phony stocks by somebody that just says, oh, just believe me, or a dodgy second-hand car, or buying into some unscrupulous and deceitful policy sold to you by your local politician. Faith is no basis to base action. Human action has to be successful. In order to live, we have to choose the right actions. We must know with certainty what we're doing and why. And this is why faith is a non-starter. If you don't know why something is true, you have no capacity to share that alleged knowledge, even if it is true. Even if you've plucked a conclusion that happens to be true, unless you understand why it's true, you have no means of sharing it effectively. And the only way that you can understand why it is true is by examining the reasons given and tracing them back to the facts of reality. This is what knowledge is. It's unsurprising that people resort to faith. There's plenty of confusion out there, and there's plenty of encouragement to rely on faith, not least from the remnants of our religious culture. People think we're moving into a more secular culture these days, but in fact we're not. Modern science is very faith-based, scientism you could call it. The assertions of governments about all of these things to do with climate and pandemics are very often repeated assertions and an unwillingness to deal with the questions of fundamentals that question these assertions. So there's a lot of encouragement to believe things. Just believe. Just do as you're told. Just get in line. Socially distance. So we haven't fully escaped the grip that faith has on our culture. Although it might seem that we're a less religious culture here in the UK and in the West in general, we really haven't ditched faith. We're widely encouraged to believe ideas that have no factual basis or have deeply questionable factual basis. We must beware of emotions too. Now, emotions are a key part of the human experience, of course, and I don't want anything I say here to be misconstrued, that I'm bashing emotions or invalidating them. I wish to point out very clearly that emotions are simply not a means of knowing what's real, what's true. They're fantastic, they're our means of enjoying life, but they don't tell us what's true. And this is very, very important to get. Our culture values emotions higher than reasoned thought and facts and evidence. And this is evidenced all around us. It's very popular to believe in following the heart rather than the head. We've had propaganda from TV shows like Star Trek that people my age will remember back in the 60s, where Captain Kirk was human with his emotions, and the story sort of had this sort of battle between Dr. Spock, the Vulcan, the unhuman, with his cold, unhuman logic, and William Shatner as Captain Kirk triumphed because he was the emotional human being. So we've had this idea rammed at us from all sides. We see it in political correctness. This insane idea of kowtowing to people's feelings. It's political correctness implicitly wishes to preserve people's good feelings and not upset anyone, to tread really carefully. That's more important than the facts and clarity and knowledge and telling it like it is. So we can see this cultural reflection of the value of emotions over and above reasoned thinking. So it's very understandable that we should be predisposed, if you like, to following our feelings. You even hear it in language. People now say, I feel this is true, and I feel that, and I don't feel. It's crept into our language and this is quite revealing. I must add that I don't mean to imply at all that we should disregard hunches, intuitive feelings, or intuitions, I should say, gut feelings. I'm not saying that these should be discounted out of hand, but I am saying they shouldn't be taken as a indication of truth. What they should do is serve as a starting point for further investigation. If you have a hunch about something or a gut feeling that something's true, investigate it. Dig up everything you can and find out why with reasons. Find out the rational argument that supports it. So hunches, intuition and gut feeling serve a useful purpose, and they should steer us to investigate in other areas. In terms of explaining hunches and intuitions, I think they're quite valid, because quite often our subconscious mind can record things that our conscious mind doesn't notice. We can be so caught up in what's happening with our attention that we miss seeing something. Something can escape our attention, but it still goes in. And dots can get connected behind the scenes, and in some respects you could say that your subconscious knows more than your conscious with respect to that issue, and so that gets fed up to you. It gets offered in as oh, what about that, In common with accepting ideas on faith, if you feel that they're true, you have no basis to share these ideas, and you have no certainty. You can't, I feel certain. Certainty is a function of the amount of evidence that supports an idea. And that can be self-evident, this is a pen, or it can be conceptual proof that amounts to evidence. But without an accumulation of evidence, certainty is impossible. And if you simply feel something is true, you will never be certain. And in the same way that if you accept ideas on faith, you will never be able to persuade and reason others. You'll never be able to tell people why what you're doing is true. Why are you refusing that experimental medical treatment? Well, I just feel that it's the right thing to do, or I feel afraid of it. That's not good enough. That doesn't tell anyone any facts. So the solution is to use reason. We need reason, proof, evidence. We need logical thinking. We must examine facts. Reason. What is reason? It sounds quite an abstract thing. And it is. It's a broad abstraction. But reason is our ability to recognize logic, in essence. It's our reason that tells us that this is a pen and the fact that it can't be not a pen at the same time. It's reason that tells us that 2 and 2 make 4. It's reason is our whole, it's the faculty, our human faculty, uniquely human faculty, that underpins everything about how we gain knowledge, how we conceptualize, how we find stuff out. When you cross the street, it's your faculty of reason that's enabling you to do that. Pigs, chickens, and squashed hedgehogs in the middle of the road, they can't cross roads because they have no faculty of reason. So when you're crossing the road, you perceive these cars, your stored knowledge of everything to do with cars and motion and momentum and impact and forces. All of this stored knowledge in your subconscious enables you to calculate speed, distance, where's the gap? Right, I'll go now. This is your faculty of reason in action. We all readily understand that we don't close our eyes and go, oh, yep, I'm going to go now. There we go. I'm being told it by my higher self. We don't do that. And we grasp immediately that would be silly. It would be dangerous. So reason is our means of knowing reality. This is why it's our means to knowing truth. And when we grasp that things are true because of these reasons, when you learn how to make a cup of tea, you know that you must boil the kettle, the water must be hot, you must add things, you must do these things. When you know how and why things occur, maybe you understand how an electric motor works, spinning a coil of wire in a magnetic field. When you understand reasons, that's when you can pass on knowledge. If we all have faith and we rest on our feelings, we will have no capacity to pass on anything other than served up conclusions, which are useless. It's worth noting about reason when we compare it to the use of faith or our feelings, our emotions, is that when we use reason, we must think. We must engage in that activity called critical thinking. And not all of us are that good at it. We're not taught it at school. We probably aren't very confident at it. Another point is it takes effort. You have to choose to do it. It doesn't happen automatically. But if you do pick up the gauntlet, as it were, the reward is that you can know what's going on and how to act with a confident level of certainty. You will feel good about yourself because you've done the right thing by the standard of your own survival and existence. You need to know stuff. You need to learn, find out what to do to live. So there's an emotional reward, but there's also certainty. And the capacity to stand up and say, I know what's right. It's because of this, A, B, C, and D. There you go. On the other hand, when we compare that to feelings and emotions, it's easy just to emote. You just introspect for a moment, and there you go. That's how you feel about it. It doesn't take any skill. You haven't got to learn how to do anything. Emotions are readily there. Whenever you want them, just introspect. And there you go. It's very easy. It's very, very tempting. But the cost is that you won't achieve certainty. And more importantly, you'll avail yourself to emotional control. If somebody says, hey, there's something really scary over here, there's a real massive danger. It could be a virus, could be something else, could be climate change. If you listen to the message uncritically and you feel the fear, if you habitually give your emotions credit for knowing what's real, well, then it's completely logical and you are going to act on that fear. So whether or not the claim is true, you've been made to act by the person delivering the message. Relying on emotions leaves you vulnerable to emotional control, to being manipulated through your emotions. And of course, we all know that fear is the big one. If you can be persuaded that something is dangerous to you, you will act in accordance with the instructions or the next best thing or your best guess. Conversely, if you can be persuaded that there's something very dangerous in your midst that you should be cautious of, but you're led to accept that it's perfectly safe, there is a danger that you will not feel fear when rightly you should. So it's all about being able to find out whether the ideas are true. We must question ideas with deeply penetrating logic. We must keep saying why, and why. And when you get that question answered, go even lower and say, why that? And because of that, well, why that? Reason and logic and persevered questions drill down to uncover the facts. And then we don't need to be, how shall I act? In the spur of the moment, where obviously our emotions drive us to act. So it's thinking and reasoning that has to come first. This gives you knowledge. There are many things that are put out in the mainstream narrative that I personally feel certain beyond any reasonable doubt are utter nonsense. So consequently, I am not frightened into acting in any particular way. And this is important. And it also means that I'm able to explain and reason why I hold the beliefs and the convictions that I do to other people. So I hope this helps shed some light on and predisposes you towards reason. There is another component to this in that emotions are widely misunderstood in our culture. Not only are we encouraged to value them more highly than reasoned thought, rational explanation, but we also, in our Western culture, have a misconception of the nature of emotions. And it's been around for a long time because, as we can see from people's predisposition to act on fear, must act. It's a powerful motivator, and our controllers know this. Anybody who wants to politically control people knows this. And let's factor in our contextual knowledge of propaganda. It's been around for a long, long time. Edward Bernays writing about it beginning of last century. Niccolo Machiavelli writing about it in the mid-1500s. He wrote a book, The Prince, which was a handbook to kings and rulers on how to manipulate and control their subjects. So if we bring this contextual information in, we have to factor in emotions and why has this idea of emotions been fed into our culture. Now, it's been around for some time. As I said, it was mainly popularized by Sigmund Freud, and also by, he sort of picked up the baton from other British philosophers who'd been putting forth this idea, but Freud really hammed it home. Excuse me. He sort of has become something of a household name as being the father of psychoanalysis, etc. But he held, very importantly, that emotions were primaries. They just sprang forth from what he called the id, and they were unfathomable. They were unknowable. They were just there, and you just have to deal with them. Emotions were the given. the primary. And his ideas were then that thinking was there to serve the ideas. So emotions would arise, we'd experience wants and desires, and then the task of the mind and the reason is then set to achieving those whims and desires. And in essence, this is the understanding of emotions that survives to this day. And I wonder, as a truth seeker, why that idea is put forward. Why are emotions hailed as the more important factor over and above reason and logic? Why are we encouraged to believe that the heart should overrule the head, etc., etc.? And the answer that I come up with that's rational is that it's an excellent means of political control. If you can encourage people to value their emotions above all else, that's going to be the thing they're listening to. And if they're afraid of something, some potentially trumped up story, they will act. They won't stop to say, now hang about, I'm feeling this. Why? Let's see whether this claim's true. Let's just sit on our hands before we dive in. So there was an alternative view of emotions that was put forth by Ayn Rand last century. And I've said this before about Ayn Rand. She is the most exceptional thinker that I've come across, and I recommend her writings to anyone seriously interested in knowing the truth, because her philosophy really is the basis for truth seekers. And I hope one day all truth seekers will come round to accepting a lot of her ideas as the basis for arriving at truth and knowing reality. But she offered this competing idea of emotions, and it's rational and it makes sense. In essence, and I'll try and give you a very brief overview of it, but in essence, she disagrees that emotions are unfathomable, unknowable, and she disagrees that they're primaries. She considers emotions as a response to our values, and as we perceive a certain situation or an idea or an event, emotions are the response of our thinking, which has resulted in our values. So it's a sort of a three-way picture here. Thinking is the primary. We think rationally, we decide what's important to us. My life's important, my health's important, my family's important, my children are important. What's really important? My job's important. How important's going out on a Saturday night? How important are these shoes? How important is going bowling at the weekend? We work out our hierarchy of values, things that are important, by thinking. Thinking is the primary activity that enables us to work out our hierarchy of values. Now, of course, if you don't think, you just have a jumbled up load of values that are all nonsense, and you might drink heavily and smoke 50 a day and do things that compromise other rational values, such as your health and your life and your marriage and so forth. So thinking potentially gives you the ability to arrive at rational values. Unthinking leaves you with just a jumbled up mess, but you still have a set of values, whichever way you go. It's your values that will determine how you react to a given event, to a given idea, to a potential threat, or to something that you love. If you love boats and you see this beautiful one that just encapsulates everything you think's fantastic about boats, you'll fall in love with that because that's a value for you. Your next door neighbour perhaps won't. Maybe he's got a favourite car or something. So it's values that are right at the heart of emotional responses. And our knowledge base obviously feeds in with our values, but when we are subject to a circumstance, a situation, or exposed to ideas, we react to it in accordance with our values. And it's our values that determine our emotional response. So there's a lot more to this idea than I can want to give time to just here, to be quite honest. But there is a post on it which goes into some more detail on my website. And I recommend looking into the ideas of Ayn Rand, because she smashes so many conventional, irrational, unfathomable, nonsensical ideas that when you really look at them, you go, my goodness, she's really onto something there. So, by way of summary, if we want to know the truth, we must take care of our method. We must not be tempted into any shortcut or an alleged shortcut, a seeming shortcut to knowledge, to truth, by going for faith, just accepting an idea without reasons, just because, or you might accept it because some important person said it. Well, that's not a reason, that's a logical fallacy. You might accept it on faith because everyone else is. Logical fallacy is another subject, but if we accept things on faith, you will not have any certainty in your knowledge, and you won't be able to pass it on in any credible fashion by giving reasons. And it's the same with emotions. If we listen to our emotions, if we consider them as a means to knowledge in error, we will scupper our ability to achieve certainty and also our ability to explain our reasons why things are true. And again, to repeat the point one last time, because it is so important, we truth seekers must spread the truth. We must get must get humanity all on the same page. We must bust the untruths that are foisted upon us through those who would manipulate us into a more controlling political system. And the only way we're going to do that, the only way the truth movement, the freedom movement is going to ever succeed, if it does, it can only succeed when it stands on firm ground, knowing why things are what they are. When you can stand on firm ground and say, this is true because A, B, C, and D, man must be free because of A, B, C, and D, this alleged threat doesn't exist because of 1, 2, 3, and 4, these reasons, we must be able to do that. And if we can't do that, and if people resort to mystic explanations, then the truth movement, freedom movement will never succeed. But I want to add one last point, that many truth seekers are also religionists, maybe Christians or whatever. And my message to them is that reality is a one whole integrated unit. There's no part of reality that's totally independent or separate or cut off from the rest of existence. And our minds, our tool of knowing what's real, our tool of knowing reality, must reflect this unity. It must be our knowledge must be an integrated whole, a sum. If we program our mind with contradictory premises, if we think, well, okay, we need evidence for this, we need evidence for this tiny particle that causes injury, we need evidence for the climate history, we need to look at how historically warm it's been and how much CO2 there's been in the air. Oh, look, much more than there is now. We need to be able to look at facts, and we need to be able to integrate them as a whole. But if one part of our mind says, oh, well, I can accept this idea, I believe in God for no reasons, I can believe in reincarnation for no reasons, nice idea, by the way, but I don't believe it because there aren't any reasons, there's no proof. But my point here is, if we hold contradictory premises in our mind, we are disintegrating our mind. We are compromising its ability to be one unified whole, which is its ability to know truth and to know reality, which is one unified whole. So if we're tempted to be part-time mystics, know that you're undercutting your mental efficacy, you're disintegrating your consciousness, and you're compromising your ability to achieve certainty. So the bottom line is, reason is your means to know truth, not faith, not emotions, reason. I hope this helps. If you've got some value from this, please give us a comment. If you're watching on one of the video platforms, please hit the like button and throw in a question or a comment. Why not? Remember to check out the website, lawfulrebel.com. And I do hope you'll join me again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see.